What if the reason most people struggle with success isn't lack of effort, but the wrong habits? In The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey reveals a powerful truth. Real success doesn't come from quick tricks or motivation. It comes from deep habits that change the way you think and act every single day. And today, we're going to uncover the habits that have transformed millions of lives. Hello, everyone. Hi, all. Welcome to BookPodCastZone. When you really look at the landscape of our lives right now, it's 2026, and we are navigating this intensely hybrid, totally fragmented remote work culture here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, completely fragmented.
Right, and our digital notifications literally never stop, like ever. Plus, the sheer velocity of economic and technological change right now can feel, well, utterly paralyzing for so many people.
It's exhausting just thinking about it, honestly.
It really is. So we are taking a deep dive into the source material today that honestly feels miraculously designed for this exact cultural moment.
Even though it's a classic framework, yeah?
Exactly. We are exploring a completely integrated approach to personal and interpersonal effectiveness. It basically takes us from the default state of human dependence, right? And moves us into this hard-won territory of independence.
Which the framework calls the private victory.
Right, the private victory.
Yeah.
And then it pushes us even further into interdependence, which is the public victory. All while wrapping that up in a continuous cycle of renewal.
Yeah, and the broader context of why this resonates so deeply right now, is that we're currently experiencing what I'd call a profound crisis of agency in the American workplace.
A crisis of agency. Say more about that.
Well, people feel entirely at the mercy of external forces. You log in on a Tuesday morning and you just feel like a cog in a machine, right? You're driven by these black box algorithms, sudden market fluctuations.
And just a relentless conveyor belt of virtual meetings.
Exactly. And this framework, it doesn't offer some superficial life hack. It's not going to, tell you how to shave 5 minutes off your inbox sorting.
No quick fixes here.
Right. It demands a fundamental, often really uncomfortable shift in your core operating system. It asks you to completely rewire how you view yourself and your fundamental relationship to the reality around you.
Which brings us right to the foundation. Because, you really cannot lead a remote team effectively or build a resilient family culture or achieve any substantial external goal if you secretly believe you're just a victim of circumstance.
You absolutely cannot.
You have to win the battle inside your own mind before you can win out in the world. And that is the essence of the very first step in the framework, which is be proactive.
Yeah, and without this foundational bedrock, the subsequent 6 habits are, well, they're entirely inaccessible. You can't even touch them.
Because you're just reacting to everything.
Exactly. The core concept here is the fundamental human freedom to choose. In our deep dive into the source material, there is a massive emphasis placed on this specific vital space.
The gap.
The gap, yes. It is the gap between stimulus, which is whatever happens to you, and response, which is how you react to it. And in that microscopic gap lies your ultimate human freedom and really your capacity for growth.
I want to linger on that gap for a second because for a huge portion of the population right now, that gap just, it does not exist.
It's totally gone.
It has been entirely erased by stress and digital conditioning. Like a stimulus happens and the reaction is instantaneous.
The closed circuit.
Exactly. You get a passive-aggressive Slack message from a colleague at 8 in the morning, and instantly, bam, your cortisol spikes, your breathing gets shallow, you decide the entire company is toxic, and you spend the next 4 hours just totally distracted and irritable.
Yeah, your whole morning is ruined.
Right. But proactivity introduces a pause. It asks you to stretch out that millisecond, to literally stand in that gap between the notification ping and your physiological and behavioral reaction, and actually make a conscious decision.
And the neuroscience behind that pause is just fascinating. When we operate without that gap, we are essentially living in an amygdala hijack.
Fight or flight mode, basically.
Right. We're letting the primitive threat-detecting part of our brain run the entire show. Reactive people, they allow their physical environment or their social weather to dictate their internal state.
Social weather, I like that term.
Yeah. So if the stock market is up and their boss praises them, they're ecstatic. But if the Wi-Fi drops out during a crucial presentation, they're devastated and furious.
Their whole emotional equilibrium is just tethered to external variables.
Exactly. And if you listen to the language they use, it's deeply revealing. They say things like, I can't do anything about this market, or that's just my personality, or my manager makes me so anxious.
They're constantly placing the locus of control outside of themselves.
Yes, they're handing the remote control of their own nervous system over to whoever or whatever happens to be dominating their feed that day.
Handing over the remote control. That phrasing captures the dynamic perfectly because proactive people operate on an entirely different paradigm,
They really do. They carry their own weather.
which is such a powerful visual.
Oh.
Like whether it's raining or shining outside, whether the Q3 projections are a total disaster or a massive triumph, they are driven by their carefully considered internal values.
They take absolute responsibility for their output. And the word responsibility in this context literally translates to responsibility, like the actual ability to choose your response.
Oh, wow. Responsibility. That's a great way to reframe it.
Right. And their language reflects this inner locus of control. Instead of, I have to, they say, I will look at our alternatives, or I prefer to handle it this way, or I choose to take this approach.
And this concept crystallizes beautifully with two visual circles the source material introduces: the circle of concern and the circle of influence.
This is a game changer for so many people.
It really is. If you are listening to this, I want you to mentally draw these two circles right now, because understanding the difference between them might be, honestly, the most vital mental health defense you can have in 2026.
Absolutely.
Let's look at the circle of concern first. This is a massive circle containing everything we care about, but essentially have zero direct control over.
Just consider the average American professional's mental load right now. Your circle of concern includes the macroeconomy, global supply chain disruptions, federal interest rate hikes.
Extreme climate events.
Yeah, climate events, and that looming anxiety that an artificial intelligence model might just, render a third of your professional skills completely obsolete in the next 3 years.
Terrifying, right. And it also includes the unpredictable behavior of your clients, the office politics you aren't privy to, the outrage cycles constantly happening on social media.
You might care passionately about all these issues, but your ability to directly alter them is virtually non-existent.
It's non-existent. And when you pour all your mental and emotional bandwidth into that circle of concern, the psychological toll is just devastating.
It drains you completely.
I see this constantly. People are doom-scrolling professional networking sites, right? They're absorbing wave after wave of layoff announcements, obsessing over rumors of corporate restructuring.
They're spending 80% of their waking energy agonizing over variables they literally cannot touch.
And the result isn't preparedness. It's pure paralysis and chronic anxiety.
Exactly. The consequence of dwelling in the circle of concern is that you adopt this narrative of victimization. You essentially convince yourself you are completely helpless.
While ignoring what you can actually do.
Right. And meanwhile, your circle of influence, which is the smaller circle residing inside the circle of concern, it actually begins to shrink.
Because you aren't using it.
Yes. The circle of influence contains the things you have absolute or at least significant control over. Your personal daily habits, your attitude, the tone of voice you use with your partner.
How you spend your first hour awake.
Exactly. The new skills you decide to learn, how you treat your body. Proactive people focus with laser-like intensity on this inner circle.
And as they consistently work on things they can control, their energy becomes positive, right? It's enlarging and magnifying.
Yeah, their competence and confidence grow, which ironically causes their circle of influence to expand outward, allowing them to eventually impact things that were previously just concerns.
Let's ground this in a very real current example. Take the anxiety around AI-driven job market changes.
Oh, perfect example. It's everywhere right now.
It is. The reactive person fixates entirely on the circle of concern. They say, AI is going to destroy my entire industry, the government isn't doing anything to regulate it, my career is doomed, and I am totally helpless.
And they just sit in that anxiety.
They just sit in it. The proactive person looks at the exact same terrifying stimulus, but they pivot their focus to the circle of influence.
They ask, what can I do today?
Right. They say, okay, AI is undeniably shifting the landscape. Therefore, I choose to dedicate 45 minutes every single morning to learning how to prompt these new models effectively. I choose to upskill so that I become the person managing the AI rather than the person replaced by it.
That is so powerful. It's the exact same external reality, but a completely divergent lived experience.
Exactly.
The proactive individual just refuses to be a victim of the macro trend. They reclaim their agency by focusing on the micro actions.
Now, I am completely taking with the theory here, but I need to push back on the language aspect for a minute,
Sure, go for it.
because this can easily start to sound like toxic positivity.
Hmm.
Let's say my US-based company suddenly reverses its remote work policy and mandates a return to the office 3 days a week.
Which is happening a lot right now.
It really is.
Right.
And let's say I despise the commute. It drains my energy. It steals time from my family. If I start walking around saying, I choose to sit in 2 hours of heavy traffic today,
Yeah.
rather than I have to commute, doesn't that cross the line into gaslighting myself?
That's a really fair point.
I mean, does changing a pronoun actually change the miserable reality of the traffic?
The skepticism is completely valid, and it's a hurdle many people face with this framework. But it is absolutely not about toxic positivity or, pretending the traffic is enjoyable.
Okay, so what is it doing?
It is about confronting the raw reality of your own agency. Think about it. You actually do not have to drive to that office. You could refuse.
I mean, I could get fired, but yes, I could refuse.
Exactly. You could quit today. But you choose to make that drive because you deeply value the financial security the job provides, or you value the healthcare benefits for your family, or maybe you just prefer the trajectory of this career over the stress of being unemployed.
You're weighing the consequences.
You're weighing the consequences and making a deliberate selection. When you say, I have to, you emotionally strip yourself of your own power. You cast yourself as a hostage to your employer and the highway system.
A hostage? Wow, yeah.
But when you say, I choose to endure this frustrating commute because providing stability for my family is my highest priority, you are no longer a hostage. You are a willing architect of your life, making a difficult but conscious trade-off.
I'm chewing on that because the distinction is incredibly subtle, but I see the mechanism now. It's about ownership.
Total ownership.
The traffic is still awful, the policy is still annoying, but by saying I choose to, I am actively reminding my own brain why I am in the car. It reconnects the immediate pain to my long-term values.
Yes, and that is much harder to do in the moment than just complaining.
Oh, way harder. But I can see how it shifts you out of that helpless victim state.
And the physiological impact of that shift is profound. Language physically rewires our neural pathways. When you repeatedly tell your brain you are trapped, I have to, I am forced to, your brain literally releases stress hormones like cortisol because it perceives a survival threat.
You feel like a cornered animal.
Precisely. But when you tell your brain you are making a deliberate choice based on an internal value system, you engage the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive functioning center of your brain.
Do you actually feel calmer?
You feel a sense of hard-won peace. Small daily language choices build the actual neurological momentum required for massive life changes. You realize you are the author of the script.
Like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Because taking control of the pen is only the very first step. Now we have to figure out what story we are actually writing.
That leads directly into the necessity of vision. You've claimed the steering wheel of your life with proactivity. But, a steering wheel is functionally useless if you don't have a destination.
We'll just drive in circles.
Exactly. Burning gas, feeling incredibly busy, but getting nowhere. And this is the essence of habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
If the first habit establishes that you are the programmer, the second habit is where you actually write the program. And the foundational principle here is that everything in the universe is created twice.
2 creations, yes.
There is always a mental creation first and a physical creation second.
And the failure to understand those 2 creations is why so many highly active, highly intelligent people end up feeling profoundly unfulfilled.
Let's use the analogy of building a custom home. I think it illustrates this perfectly.
It really does.
You would never, in your right mind, go to a lumber yard, buy $10,000 worth of wood, drive to an empty lot in the suburbs, grab a nail gun, and just start arbitrarily fastening boards together.
That would be a disaster.
A total disaster. If you attempted the physical creation without the mental creation, you would end up with a structurally unsound nightmare. You'd build walls and then realize, oh wait, I forgot to run the plumbing.
Or the roof would collapse because there were absolutely no load-bearing calculations.
Right. The physical execution would be a catastrophic waste of energy and resources precisely because it lacked an architect's blueprint.
Exactly. You must start with the blueprint. You design the house in your mind, and then on paper, down to the absolute most granular detail.
You decide where the windows need to be to catch the morning sunlight. You plan how the kitchen naturally flows into the family room.
You do all of this heavy, complex mental creation long before a single shovel ever touches the dirt. And habit 2 is the arduous process of creating the architectural blueprint for your own existence.
And the chilling reality is that if you do not actively create your own blueprint, you are, by default, allowing other people and external circumstances to draw it for you.
Which happens to so many of us.
It does. You end up unconsciously living out the scripts handed to you by your parents' unfulfilled ambitions, or your peers' status anxieties, or just the relentless messaging of modern consumer culture.
It's a terrifying thought. And to violently break out of those default scripts, the source material offers a thought experiment that is profoundly confronting. It is known as the funeral exercise.
I want to walk you, the listener, through this right now. Please don't just gloss over this. Really try to visualize it.
It's powerful if you actually do it.
Imagine yourself, right now, getting dressed in dark clothing. You drive to a local funeral parlor, you park your car, you feel the gravel under your shoes, you walk through the heavy wooden doors.
Setting the scene.
You smell the distinct scent of lilies and floor wax. You hear the hushed whispers of your family and friends, the soft, somber music playing in the background. You slowly walk down the center aisle, past the rows of people you love, and you look down into the casket.
And you come face to face with yourself.
Yes, this is your funeral, exactly 3 years from today.
The visceral nature of the exercise is intentional. It bypasses the ego and goes straight to the core of your conscience.
You take a seat in the front row. The program says that 4 distinct people are going to walk up to the podium to speak about your life.
4 very specific people.
The first is someone from your immediate family, your spouse, your child, or a sibling. The second speaker is one of your closest friends. The third is a colleague from your profession, someone you worked with daily. And the fourth is someone from your community, your church, or an organization you volunteered with.
And the profound, really terrifying question is this. What do you deeply, desperately want each of those 4 people to say about you?
What kind of parent or partner do you want their words to reflect? What kind of friend?
What specific difference do you want that colleague to say you made in their life or in the industry?
When people bravely sit down and physically write out the answers to this exercise, a massive paradigm shift occurs. The clarity is piercing.
Because almost no one ever writes that they want their coworker to stand up in tears and say, he was a hero, he successfully answered every single weekend Slack message within 30 seconds.
Right. Or her legacy is that she spent 60 hours a week optimizing our Q3 revenue margins while systematically ignoring her children.
No one's ultimate legacy is they finally achieved inbox 0.
No. Yet if we look at how most of us spend our actual waking hours, you would think that was the ultimate goal. We are pouring our life force into things that won't even warrant a footnote at our funeral.
The funeral exercise brutally and beautifully cleaves away the short-term conveniences, the dopamine hits of modern busy work, and the heavy societal pressures. It distills your existence down to your long-term principles and your deepest values.
And once you have excavated that clarity, you can begin to draft a personal mission statement.
Which is not some corporate jargon document.
Definitely not. It is a deeply personal written constitution. It explicitly defines what you want to be, your core character traits, and what you want to do, your vital contributions and achievements.
In 2026, we are bombarded by algorithmic microtrends, right? Influencer lifestyles constantly projecting wealth, and this hyper-competitive, anxiety-ridden corporate ladder.
Navigating this without a personal mission statement is literally like trying to sail through a hurricane without a compass.
You will just be blown in whatever direction the wind is currently howling.
Exactly. But if you have taken the time to define your core, why? If you know your foundation is rooted in your physical vitality, your family's emotional stability, and doing work that has genuine utility, it completely alters your daily operational matrix.
The practical utility of a mission statement is that it becomes your ultimate filter for decision-making.
Let's talk about an example of that filter in action.
Sure. Imagine an opportunity arises, a significant promotion at work. It offers a massive salary bump and a prestigious title, but it demands relentless travel and 70-hour work weeks.
A tough choice for a lot of people.
A person operating without a mission statement, just running on the default societal script, will likely accept it reactively. The script says more money and higher status equals success.
Yeah, cool.
But a person who has internalized habit 2 pulls out their blueprint. They measure the promotion against their constitution. They see clearly that accepting the role violently contradicts their stated core value of being deeply present for their children's formative years.
Wow. And armed with that clarity, they can confidently and peacefully decline the offer without fear of missing out.
Exactly. They are steering the vehicle based on their own highly specific map.
So habit 2 gives you the architectural blueprint for your life. But, I mean, a blueprint sitting on a desk doesn't build a house on its own.
It certainly doesn't.
How do you actually lay the bricks day after day on a chaotic Tuesday morning when your inbox is on fire, your kid is sick, and your manager's demanding an urgent status report?
That agonizing gap between having a noble plan and actually executing it in the messy reality of daily life, that is exactly what Habit 3 is designed to bridge. But first things first.
This is the habit of rigorous personal management.
If Habit 2 was the leadership function, determining what the right things are, Habit 3 is the management function, developing the discipline to actually do them.
And a critical misconception we really need to dismantle is the idea that effective management is about doing more things at a faster pace.
Efficiency is completely irrelevant if you are doing the wrong things.
Yes. Habit 3 is about doing the right things first, which introduces one of the most practical and devastatingly accurate tools in the entire framework, the time management matrix.
We need to spend significant time unpacking the psychology behind all 4 of these quadrants because this matrix perfectly diagnoses the exhaustion of the modern American worker.
It really does. So the matrix categorizes every single activity in our lives by 2 intersecting metrics, urgency and importance.
And the definitions of those 2 words are vital. Urgent means an activity requires immediate, instantaneous attention. It is in your face. It presses on you.
Like a ringing phone.
Exactly. A notification badge on your screen is urgent. Someone knocking on your office door is urgent. Urgency acts upon us. We react to it.
But important is different.
Important, conversely, has absolutely nothing to do with immediate pressure. Importance has to do with results. If something is important, it directly contributes to your overarching mission, your deep values, and your high priority goals.
The exact blueprint you defined in Habit 2. Okay, let's explore Quadrant 1, urgent and important. This is the quadrant of crises, pressing problems, and deadline-driven projects.
Like when your kitchen is literally on fire.
Right. Or a major legacy client is furious and threatening to pull their account today.
Yeah.
Or you have a sudden medical emergency.
You cannot ignore Quadrant 1. If the kitchen is on fire, you must put it out.
Obviously.
The profound danger, however, is that an enormous number of professionals spend their entire lives residing exclusively in this quadrant.
They become addicted to the adrenaline of crisis management.
They are permanent firefighters, and when you live your entire life in an emergency state, the physiological and psychological toll is catastrophic.
It leads directly to profound stress, cynical burnout, and just constantly operating in a shadow survival mode.
The objective is to manage quadrant crises as they arise, but to systematically shrink this quadrant by spending far more time in the next one.
Quadrant 2, the magic quadrant.
The absolute core of effective personal management.
This quadrant is not urgent, but it is deeply important.
All genuine, sustainable growth in human life occurs in Quadrant 2. This encompasses activities like relationship building, writing and refining your personal mission statement, long-range strategic planning,
Physical exercise, preventative health maintenance.
and deep, uninterrupted, focused work.
But here is the psychological trap, and why so many of us fail here. Because Quadrant 2 activities are not urgent. They do not act on us. The friction to start them is incredibly high.
So high.
Your treadmill is not going to send you an aggressive push notification demanding you run on it.
I wish it would sometimes, but no.
Right. Your teenager is not going to schedule a calendar invite to demand you spend 45 minutes asking about their complex social anxieties.
They definitely won't.
And your career is not going to scream at you to take a Saturday afternoon to master a new software architecture that will make you promotable in 2 years. You have to exert your proactive muscle habit 1 to deliberately carve out time for Quadrant 2.
You have to act upon it because it will never act upon you.
Never.
And the resistance to Quadrant 2 is compounded exponentially by the environment of the modern U.S. workplace. The boundaries between our professional and private lives have been obliterated by technology.
Completely obliterated. We are besieged by the gravitational pull of the bottom half of the matrix, which constantly cannibalizes our time for Quadrant 2.
Let's expose Quadrant 3 because this is where the modern remote worker is being bled dry.
Quadrant 3 is urgent, but not important. I call this the quadrant of mass deception.
That's a great name for it. The deception is powerful because the urgency creates a phantom sense of importance. But the urgency is almost always based on someone else's priorities or on the structural flaws of your organization.
In 2026, Quadrant 3 is the endless staccato barrage of Slack or Teams messages.
It's the email marked with a red exclamation point that turns out to be a minor administrative query.
Yes. Or it is the agonizingly common phenomenon of the mandatory cross-departmental Zoom meeting, where 40 people sit silently on mute for an hour while 2 people discuss a logistical issue that could have been resolved with a 3-sentence email.
Oh, the worst. It is the quadrant of constant low-level interruption.
I talk to so many people who spend 10 hours a day trapped in Quadrant 3, and because they are constantly responding, constantly typing, constantly talking, they feel incredibly busy.
The dopamine hit of clearing notifications tricks their brain into feeling productive.
But when they log off at 6 p.m. and look back at the day, they feel this hollow pit in their stomach because they realize they didn't advance a single meaningful goal.
They just spent the day playing whack-a-mole with other people's minor emergencies.
Whack-a-mole, exactly. And the tragic cycle continues because after being psychologically battered by the stress of Quadrant the First and the chaotic deception of Quadrant 3, people are too exhausted to engage in Quadrant 2.
They have no cognitive energy left to read a book or have a deep conversation, so they escape into Quadrant 4.
Quadrant 4, not urgent and not important, the wasteland.
It is pure numbing. Mindless doom scrolling on social media for 3 unbroken hours. Binge watching a streaming series you don't even find compelling, simply to stop your brain from thinking.
Engaging in trivial busy work.
These activities offer absolutely zero long-term value, and they don't even have the excuse of pressing upon you. They are the definition of revenge bedtime procrastination, where you steal sleep from yourself just to reclaim a few hours of mindless autonomy.
So the million-dollar question for the listener is, how do we actually execute a jailbreak? How do we build a life centered in Quadrant 2 when our entire digital and corporate culture practically demands we worship Quadrants 1 and 3?
The mechanical execution of this escape relies on 2 specific strategies: weekly planning and the concept of big rocks.
Okay, break that down for us.
Daily planning is a trap because it keeps your vision constrained to the immediate weeds of urgency. You just look at a list of fires to fight.
Right.
Weekly planning elevates your perspective. The methodology suggests sitting down before the chaos of the week begins, perhaps Sunday evening or early Monday morning, and explicitly identifying your key roles.
Because you are not just an employee.
Exactly. You are a parent, a manager, an individual seeking health, a spouse, a community member. Once you identify those roles, you deliberately choose 1 or 2 vital Quadrant 2 goals for each role to accomplish that week.
And those goals become your big rocks. I absolutely love the tactile nature of this visual. Let's walk through it. Imagine you have a large, empty glass jar sitting on your desk.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Next to it, you have a pile of large rocks, a pile of pebbles, and a pile of sand. The jar represents your finite time this week.
Your limited capacity.
Right. If you pour the sand and the pebbles into the jar first, which represent all the minor tasks, the endless emails, the constant notifications, the Quadrant 3 interruptions, the jar rapidly fills up.
And then?
When you finally try to fit the big rocks in, which represent your high-priority Quadrant 2 tasks like strategic planning, deep relationship building, or your physical health, they literally cannot fit. They just bounce off the top of the sand.
It's so true. The paradigm shift of habit 3 is the realization that if you place the big rocks into the empty jar first, you can then pour the pebbles and the sand in around them.
Because the minor urgent tasks will fluidly shift and fill in the inevitable gaps around your major priorities.
The profound lesson here is that effective living doesn't mean you prioritize whatever happens to be on your schedule. It means you proactively schedule your priorities.
Which requires an immense amount of courage. Because in order to put those big rocks in the jar first, you have to actively say no to the sand.
You have to let some fires burn.
You do. You have to have the nerve to close your communication apps for 2 hours while you do deep work. You have to politely decline the useless meeting.
It is agonizing for people pleasers, but you have to find the courage to say no to good, comfortable, easy things so you have the temporal space to say yes to the great, difficult things.
That mastery of time and purpose really concludes the private victory. If you internalize these first 3 habits, you have fundamentally evolved from dependence to independence.
You are no longer a victim. You are proactive. You are no longer wandering. You have a clear, principle-centered vision.
And you are no longer driven by the loudest distraction. You manage your time based on your deepest values.
Exactly.
But the reality is, we don't live in isolation chambers. You can be the most proactive, organized, visionary individual on the planet, but if you treat other people terribly, you will hit a very low ceiling on your success.
A very low ceiling. True effectiveness in a complex world, whether you are launching a product, managing a remote workforce, or raising a family, requires working intimately with others.
We have to move from independence to interdependence. We have to achieve the public victory.
And to do that, we must radically shift our underlying assumptions about human interaction. This brings us to habit 4. Think win-win.
Habit 4 explores the philosophy of mutual benefit. To truly grasp what win-win means, we have to contrast it against the default paradigms of human interaction that the source material meticulously outlines.
Right. There are 6 primary paradigms we operate within. Win-win, win-lose, lose-win, lose-lose-win, and finally, win-win or no deal.
Let's dissect the most pervasive one first, because it's the operating system most of us have been ruthlessly programmed with since kindergarten. Win-lose.
Win-lose is the authoritarian, zero-sum approach to life. The underlying belief is, if I'm going to get my way, you inherently cannot get yours.
It relies entirely on power, position, credentials, or just sheer force of personality.
And we are aggressively conditioned into this paradigm. Think about school. Grading on a curve dictates that for me to feel the validation of an A, someone else must suffer the indignity of a C.
Right. Or in athletics, the only way to experience the joy of victory is to inflict the pain of defeat on the opposing team.
It is deeply rooted in what is called the scarcity mentality, the anxious underlying belief that life possesses a finite amount of success, love, or resources. It views the world as a sevel pie. If you manage to grab a large slice, I am mathematically guaranteed to get less.
I hear the theory, but I have to aggressively challenge this from a practical standpoint. Let's look at a hyper-competitive U.S. corporate environment in 2026. Or let's look at a brutal real estate negotiation in a market with low inventory.
Okay, let's look at it.
In those scenarios, isn't win-lose just the unvarnished reality of survival? If I am trying to buy a house, my objective is to pay the absolute lowest price possible. The seller's objective is to extract the highest price possible. Every single dollar I save is literally a dollar extracted from their pocket.
That's the transaction, yes.
So if I go into that negotiation singing Kumbaya, trying to make sure the seller feels great, aren't I just going to get fleeced? How is win-win not just a naive, idealistic fantasy in a cutthroat market?
It is a critical challenge, and it is the exact reason so many people dismiss Habit 4 as soft or unrealistic. The flaw in that challenge is that it only looks at the immediate transactional moment. It ignores the long-term reality of human relationships. Win-win is emphatically not about being nice, and it is certainly not a quick-fix negotiation tactic. It is a philosophy rooted in the abundance mentality, the core belief that there is plenty out there for everyone, and that through creative cooperation, we can actually expand the size of the pie rather than just fighting over the existing slices.
But back to the real estate example.
Right. Let's take your real estate example. A ruthless, transactional win-lose approach might successfully bully the seller into a slightly lower closing price today. But what is the hidden cost?
I mean, they're mad, but I got the house.
The seller feels cheated and deeply resentful. Perhaps they intentionally forget to mention the quirk with the basement flooding, or they leave the property in a filthy condition, or they refuse to answer your call 2 weeks later when you can't figure out the complex HVAC system. You won the battle, but the ensuing war costs you far more than the dollars you saved. Ah, I see. That makes sense in a one-off transaction. What about inside a company? If a middle manager uses a strict win-lose approach with their remote team, constantly taking credit for their ideas, demanding rigid compliance with tracking software, offering zero flexibility, they might actually hit their Q3 productivity metrics. They get their bonus, they win.
They absolutely might hit the short-term metric, but consider the blast radius of that approach. What happens to the underlying fabric of the team?
The employees become deeply resentful.
Exactly. Trust, which is the actual currency of speed and innovation, is entirely destroyed. They stop sharing creative ideas because they know the manager will steal them. They start doing the bare minimum to survive.
Quiet quitting.
Yes. And in a 2026 work environment where highly skilled talent is incredibly mobile, those employees will simply quiet quit and then leave. The manager's short-term win of hitting a quarterly metric results in a catastrophic long-term lose when the turnover, recruitment, and retraining costs bleed the company of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Wow. So win-win is really the stubborn pursuit of solutions, where all parties feel genuinely good about the decision and feel deeply committed to the execution of the action plan.
It is. And the source material points out that achieving that requires a very delicate, high-wire act of balancing two distinct traits: courage and consideration.
It's a phenomenal matrix.
hmm
You need the courage to forcefully articulate and stand up for your own needs, your own vision, and your own boundaries.
Simultaneously, you must possess high consideration and empathy for the other person's needs and constraints.
Because if you have immense consideration for the other party, but absolutely no courage to speak your truth, you plunge into the lose-win paradigm,
You become a martyr, a doormat. You constantly say, go ahead, I'll just take the hit. I want to keep the peace.
which feels noble in the moment, but internally it builds up a reservoir of toxic, passive-aggressive resentment that eventually destroys the relationship anyway.
And on the flip side, if two highly courageous, deeply stubborn, ego-driven, win-lose individuals collide in a boardroom or a marriage, what happens?
You inevitably end up with lose-lose. The conflict becomes so vindictive, so focused on ensuring the other person doesn't win, that both parties will willingly sink the ship just to watch the other person drown.
It is the philosophy of mutually assured destruction.
So practically speaking, what happens if you enter a negotiation with a client or a partner and you genuinely, forcefully try for a win-win, but after hours of discussion, you simply cannot find a solution that benefits both parties?
That is where the ultimate, most liberating form of this habit is introduced. Win-win or no deal.
No deal.
Yes. If we explore all the options and realize that our goals are fundamentally incompatible and we cannot find a synergistic solution that works for both of us, we agree to disagree amicably. We simply walk away. We make no deal.
The psychological relief of having no deal as an option is staggering. It removes all the desperation. If you know you can walk away, you don't have to manipulate the other person, you don't have to compromise your core values, and most importantly, you preserve the respect and the relationship for potential future collaborations.
It's totally free.
But there is a massive roadblock here. You cannot possibly reach a mutually beneficial win-win agreement if you have absolutely no idea what the other person actually considers a win. You cannot just project your own desires onto them and assume they want what you want.
You really can.
You have to undergo the arduous process of figuring out their deep needs first. This leads us directly to the single most difficult habit to master. Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
It is arguably the most critical and rare skill in the entire landscape of human interaction. True empathetic communication.
Because the fundamental breakdown in our society is that the vast majority of people do not listen with the intent to genuinely understand the other person. They listen almost exclusively with the intent to formulate their own reply.
This behavior is called autobiographical listening, and every single one of us is guilty of it constantly.
Let's give an example. Imagine a scenario. A friend calls you deeply distressed about a conflict they're having with their teenage daughter. While their mouth is moving and they're pouring out their heart, what are you doing?
You are actually processing the nuance of their pain.
No. You are inside your own head. You are filtering their words through your own history. You are frantically preparing your brilliant advice, or worse, you're just waiting for them to take a breath so you can hijack the conversation and say, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly how you feel. Let me tell you what my daughter did to me last week."
We do it incessantly. We filter everything through our own ego. We evaluate, we either agree or disagree instantly. We probe, we ask interrogating questions from our own frame of reference.
We advise, we give counsel based on our own life experience. Or we interpret, we try to figure out their motives based on our own psychological makeup. We project our own autobiography onto their situation.
But why do we do this? Is it just inherent selfishness?
Well, it is partly ego, but it is also deeply neurological. The human brain is capable of processing speech at roughly 400 to 500 words per minute.
But the average person only speaks at a rate of about 125 words per minute.
Right. So while you are listening to someone talk, your brain has a massive amount of excess cognitive capacity. Nature abhors a vacuum, so your brain fills that empty processing space with your own memories, your own judgments, and your own impending monologues.
It requires immense deliberate discipline to force that excess cognitive capacity to focus entirely on the speaker's emotions and body language instead of your own internal chatter.
And the source material illustrates the absurdity of autobiographical listening with a brilliant medical analogy. The phrase is, "diagnose before you prescribe."
I love this analogy.
Imagine waking up with agonizing stomach pain. You rush to a doctor's office. You sit on the exam table, clutching your side, and you say, "Doctor, I am in terrible pain." But before you can explain where it hurts, how long it's been happening, or what you ate for dinner, the doctor simply rips a sheet off his prescription pad, scribbles a drug name, hands it to you, and says, "Here, take these pills. They worked phenomenally well for my migraine yesterday."
It is comical. You would run out of that clinic in terror. You would likely report them for malpractice. It is the height of arrogance to prescribe a solution without investigating the specific symptoms.
Yet, we commit this exact form of conversational malpractice every single day. We aggressively hand out our conversational prescriptions without ever taking the time to truly diagnose the other person's reality.
Empathic listening is the radical opposite of this behavior. It is listening not just with your ears, but with your eyes to read body language, and with your heart to sense the underlying emotion.
It is the arduous effort of getting completely inside the other person's frame of reference. It is vital to note. Empathic listening does not mean you agree with them.
It means you fully, deeply understand them, both emotionally and intellectually, from their perspective.
The urgency of this habit in the current U.S. cultural climate cannot be overstated. We are living in an era of unprecedented algorithmic polarization in 2026. Online and offline, people have retreated into impenetrable echo chambers.
When someone brings up a highly charged topic, a political election, a controversial corporate policy, a social issue, our default conditioned reaction is to immediately attack their premise.
We build a straw man of their argument and violently prescribe our own superior worldview. The defensive walls shoot up in a millisecond.
But watch what happens if you apply habit 5 in that exact tense moment. Instead of attacking, you pause. You suppress your ego. And you carefully reflect back what you are hearing them say, focusing on the emotion behind the words.
You say, "So if I am understanding you correctly, you are feeling incredibly anxious and frustrated about this new policy because you feel it threatens the safety and stability of your local community. Is that right?"
You are not agreeing that the policy is bad. You are simply validating their emotional reality and their logical progression.
The psychological mechanics of what happens next are astounding. It is like releasing the valve on a pressure cooker. The source material refers to this as providing psychological air.
When a person feels misunderstood, they are suffocating. They will fight desperately just to be heard.
But the moment they feel you have genuinely accurately heard them, the moment they receive that psychological air, their frantic need to defend themselves evaporates. Their physiological tension drops.
And it is only then, after the defensive barriers have been lowered by empathy, that they become willing and open to hearing your perspective. That is the sequential nature of the habit. Seek first to understand, and only then seek to be understood.
It requires immense vulnerability, because when you truly, deeply listen to someone else without your defenses up, you run the very real risk of being changed or influenced by what you hear. Your own mind might be changed.
But that vulnerability is the exact required price of admission for the pinnacle of interpersonal effectiveness. Which brings us to habit 6, synergize.
When you combine the mutual respect and abundance mentality of habit 4, think win-win, with the deep empathic understanding of habit 5, you create the exact chemical conditions required for a magical outcome.
Synergy is the highest, most complex activity in all of human life. It is the true test, the ultimate manifestation of all the perceiving habits operating in concert.
The core definition is simple in theory, but revolutionary in practice. The whole is mathematically and fundamentally greater than the sum of its individual parts.
It defies basic arithmetic. 1 plus 1 does not equal 2, it equals 3, or 5, or 50.
Precisely because synergy is emphatically not compromise. We often confuse the two.
In a standard compromise, 1 plus 1 equals 1.5. Two parties come to the table, and they both slowly give up pieces of what they truly want until they reach a lukewarm, middle ground solution that neither of them is actually thrilled about.
It is a mutually tolerated disappointment. Synergy is entirely different. It is creative cooperation. It is the rigorous process of finding a third alternative that is objectively better, more innovative, and more effective than either of the original proposals brought to the table.
I find that a culinary analogy explains this best. Let's look at the process of baking a cake.
Okay, I love this one.
If you walk into a kitchen and simply lay out a cup of flour, a cup of raw sugar, a stick of butter, and a couple of raw eggs on the counter, you just have a collection of raw, independent ingredients.
If you were to eat a spoonful of dry flour, it would be awful. A raw egg. Disgusting. The ingredients in isolation are unimpressive.
But when you actively combine them, when you integrate them in the right proportions, and you add the catalyst of heat from an oven when you synergize them, You create a cake.
And the cake is something entirely different in form, texture, and taste. It's completely new and vastly superior to any of the individual ingredients.
That is the exact mechanism of human synergy. And the absolute most critical requirement for synergy to occur is the celebration and valuation of differences.
If you have two people on a strategic planning team who share the exact same socioeconomic background, the exact same university education, and the exact same psychological worldview, one of them is redundant.
You do not generate synergy from sameness, you only get an echo chamber. You generate synergy from friction and diversity.
We see the desperate need for this in innovative U.S. tech companies right now. When the best organizations build a task force to solve a complex problem, they don't lock 5 senior software engineers in a room.
That just produces a technically perfect product that no customer actually wants to use.
Exactly. Instead, they put a back-end engineer, a behavioral psychologist, a graphic designer, and a frontline customer service representative in the room. They all look at the exact same problem through entirely different lenses.
And if and only if they have established the trust of win-win and the communication of empathic listening, magic happens.
The designer points out a user interface flaw the engineer was blind to. The psychologist suggests a behavioral nudge the designer wouldn't have considered. The customer service rep highlights a pain point that completely alters the product roadmap.
Through that creative friction, they build a third alternative, a product that utterly dominates the market because it integrates multiple dimensions of reality. They synergized.
It applies just as powerfully to the micro level of a family. Imagine a couple trying to plan a rare one-week vacation. He is exhausted by the city and desperately wants to go to a remote cabin in the mountains to fish and sit in silence.
She is feeling intellectually starved and wants to go to a bustling metropolitan city to visit art museums and eat at new restaurants.
If they use a win-lose approach, they argue until one gives in. If they go to the cabin, she is bored and resentful. If they go to the city, he is overstimulated and cranky.
If they compromise, they might decide to visit a moderately sized, boring suburb that has one mediocre museum and a small pond. Neither gets what they want. It's a lose-lose dressed up as fairness.
But if they apply synergy, they use empathic listening to dive deep into the why beneath their desires. He realizes he doesn't necessarily need to fish. He needs deep quiet and a connection to nature to decompress.
She realizes she doesn't need a massive city. She needs cultural stimulation and aesthetic beauty.
Once they understand the underlying needs, they brainstorm a third alternative. They rent a secluded, quiet house just outside a vibrant, artistic mountain town like Santa Fe or Asheville.
He gets his quiet mornings hiking in breathtaking nature, and she gets her afternoons exploring incredible local art galleries and culinary scenes. The vacation they create together is exponentially better than either of their original rigid ideas.
That is the immense creative power of the public victory. So we have successfully built this incredible, high-functioning human machine. We have achieved deep personal mastery and vision, and we have cultivated incredible synergistic interpersonal collaboration.
But this brings us to the final existential question of the framework. What happens if you run a high-performance sports car at 150 miles per hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you never pull over to change the oil, rotate the tires, or fill the gas tank?
The engine inevitably explodes. The vehicle breaks down completely. Which leads us to the final habit, the one that encompasses, protects, and sustains all the other 6. Habit 7, sharpen the saw.
The core concept here is balanced, continuous self-renewal. The principle is illustrated by a very famous, very simple story. Imagine you are walking through a dense forest in the Pacific Northwest.
You hear the sound of frantic sawing, and you come across a woodcutter. He is drenched in sweat, his muscles are shaking from exhaustion, and he is violently hacking away at a massive oak tree with a handsaw.
He looks absolutely miserable, and he is making almost no progress. You watch for a moment, and you ask him, "What are you doing?"
Shoots you an irritated glare and groans, "I'm sawing down this tree. I've been at it for 5 brutal hours."
You look closely at the saw he is using, and you notice that the metal teeth are completely blunted and dull. So you gently suggest, "Why don't you stop for just 10 minutes and sharpen that saw? It would cut through the wood so much faster with a sharp blade."
And the woodcutter yells back, "I don't have time to stop and sharpen the saw. Can't you see I'm too busy sawing?"
It is a brilliant, tragic, and painfully accurate metaphor for modern professional life. We ourselves are the instruments, the tools of our own effectiveness.
If we do not ruthlessly carve out the time to preserve and continuously enhance the greatest asset we possess, our own physical and mental machinery, we eventually become dull, inefficient, and broken.
Habit 7 is the ultimate quadrant 2 activity. It is the definition of non-urgent, highly important preventative maintenance. And the source material is deeply specific that this renewal cannot be one-dimensional. It must happen across 4 distinct, interconnected dimensions of our nature.
We need to explore each of these 4 dimensions deeply, because ignoring even one creates a structural imbalance that will eventually topple the whole system. Let's start with the physical dimension.
This is the fundamental care of our biological machine. It involves intentional nutrition, securing sufficient high-quality sleep, and engaging in consistent exercise.
It is about building the cardiovascular endurance, the flexibility, and the muscular strength necessary to handle the physical and stress demands of your life.
In the U.S. work culture of 2026, the physical dimension is under unprecedented assault. We have engineered a society where it is entirely possible to sit in an ergonomic desk chair for 10 hours, stare at a glowing rectangle, have a drone deliver our high-sodium dinner, and then move to a couch to stare at a larger glowing rectangle until we fall asleep.
Our bodies are literally atrophying from disuse while our nervous systems are fried by chronic stress. Prioritizing a 45-minute weightlifting session or a brisk walk in the morning sunlight is no longer a vanity project. It is a fundamental biological requirement for maintaining the baseline energy required to execute habit 1 and be proactive.
If your body is exhausted, your mind will be reactive. That biological reality feeds directly into the second area of renewal, the mental dimension.
This is the realm of continuous cognitive development. Most of our formal mental development happens inside the structured environment of school or university.
But a tragic phenomenon occurs when people graduate and enter the workforce. They let their minds atrophy. They stop reading challenging, serious literature. They stop writing to clarify their thoughts.
They spend all their discretionary cognitive bandwidth in the wasteland of Quadrant 4, consuming endless streams of algorithmic, short-form entertainment that actively degrades their attention span.
The neuroscience here is alarming. We know about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on how it is used. If you spend 3 hours a day rapidly scrolling through 15-second videos, you are actively training your brain to require constant novelty-driven dopamine spikes, and you are destroying your capacity for deep, sustained focus.
Sharpening the mental saw requires violently pushing back against that algorithmic conditioning. It means committing to reading broadly, history, philosophy, complex industry analyses.
It means engaging in deep problem-solving, strategic planning, and organizing your thoughts through journaling. You have to constantly feed your mind new, high-quality ingredients so that you have something valuable to contribute to the synergistic process of Habit 6.
The third area of renewal shifts outward. It is the social-emotional dimension. Interestingly, unlike the physical or mental dimensions, which often require solitary focus, sharpening the social-emotional saw doesn't necessarily require taking time completely away from your daily activities,
Right.
because it happens in our interactions with others.
Our emotional stability is inextricably tied to the quality of our social bonds. We are living through an epidemic of profound loneliness in the U.S. right now, ironically, during an era of hyperconnectivity.
We have thousands of social media contacts, but very few people we can call in a crisis. Renewing this dimension involves deliberately deepening our core relationships.
It means actively practicing the empathic listening of Habit 5 with your partner. It means finding ways to serve your local community without expecting a financial return.
It is about continuously making deposits into the emotional bank accounts of your friends, family, and colleagues through acts of kindness, kept promises, and genuine apologies. You derive intrinsic emotional security from knowing you act with integrity toward others.
And finally, the fourth area is the spiritual dimension. It is important to clarify that in the context of this framework, spiritual does not strictly or exclusively mandate organized religion, although it certainly encompasses that for many millions of people.
The spiritual dimension is the very core, your center, your deep commitment to your ultimate value system. It is the wellspring from which your personal mission statement in Habit 2 flows.
For some listeners, sharpening this saw means a rigorous daily practice of prayer, fasting, and scripture study. For others, it means a disciplined meditation practice.
It might mean immersing yourself in profound classical music or great literature that moves your soul. For many, it is simply spending quiet, disconnected, reflective time in the awe-inspiring presence of nature.
The mechanism doesn't matter as much as the function. It is whatever practice connects you to the timeless, enduring truths that guide your life and provide a sense of peace amidst chaos.
The very real, pressing threat we face today is the glorification of extreme burnout. We wear our exhaustion and our busyness like badges of honor, proving our worth to the corporate machine.
But the blunt truth of Habit 7 is that taking the time to rigorously renew yourself across these four dimensions is not an act of selfishness. It is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite to living the other six habits powerfully.
You cannot maintain the space to be proactive. You cannot summon the patience to listen empathetically. And you cannot generate the creative energy for synergy if you are physically depleted, mentally dull, emotionally isolated, and spiritually bankrupt.
It is the engine that powers the entire system. When you step back and look at the massive journey we have just charted, the cohesion of this framework is breathtaking.
We begin by recognizing the dependency of simply reacting to the world. We claw our way to personal independence by claiming our proactive agency, writing a principle-centered vision, and executing with disciplined time management.
Then, armed with that profound inner stability, we step out into the terrifying, beautiful world of interdependence, seeking mutual benefit, understanding others at a soul level, and generating synergistic solutions that change the world.
And we wrap that entire human experience in a protective, continuous ring of holistic self-renewal.
It maps with startling precision onto the specific, acute challenges we face today. When you are feeling entirely overwhelmed by the digital noise, the economic uncertainty, and the relentless pace of 2026, these 7 habits act as an anchor.
They pull you back to your center. They violently remind us that while we cannot control the furious winds of external change, we retain absolute sovereign control over how we set our own sails. Think about the biggest obstacle you're facing right now. What if the barrier to your next breakthrough isn't a lack of knowledge or a lack of time, but simply a dull saw in one of these 4 dimensions that you've been ignoring?
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the source material. We challenge you to not just listen to this, but to act. Pick just one single habit today and take one concrete step to start moving from a reactive victim of circumstance to a highly effective architect of your own life.